What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to episode 196 of the Designated Players Podcast. Today, we are going to finish up our What Went Wrong mini-series by highlighting the last two teams who missed out directly on the 2023 MLS Cup playoffs and talking about what went wrong for them to be on the outside looking in. It is a sad day when we have to talk about Minnesota United not making the playoffs, but we'll also cover the Portland Timbers as well. Both teams are managerless and playoffless by the time 2023 came to an end for them, and we're going to take a look at some smoking guns for the reasons that they missed it. And we'll talk about what to do to fix it. I think that's a pretty good explanation. What do you think?
Well, it's like the third time or fourth time we're doing this at this point, so I feel like the explanation doesn't have to be very good. You could just listen to another episode and you'll get the idea.
Ooh, nice plug. Good job. Way to podcast.
Thank you. I try.
How you doing, buddy? You have a good Thanksgiving?
I did have a good Thanksgiving. How was yours?
Ah, it's fine. I was here.
Got my shopping done.
Yeah, I've got almost everything done.
Good preparation.
Yeah.
There were some disappointing sales on the MLS site, though.
I'm about to say, I don't
not necessarily sales. Sorry, I want to say disappointing scarf selection on the site. The only scarves below $20 were just Orlando's or a Liga MX scarf, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I assume you don't have a new one this time because of that disappointing layout. So I'll ask you what sort of scarf you're wearing today.
I don't have a Minnesota scarf and I don't have a Portland scarf. So I just went to my stack of scarves and I just grabbed whatever was on the bottom because I figured it's been a while since I brought it out. So on the bottom was one of my many Atlanta scarves.
Many? You got like one. Two.
I have four, I'll have you know.
Wow. You're tough.
I do like this scarf, though. It's a nice one.
That's not too bad. I myself am rocking with our Rose City boys. Portland.
Sick scarf.
I love this one. This is one of my favorites. Timbers on the other side. So the design is split that way, but I think, yeah, it's this way. Where if you meet it in the middle, it makes a tree. Makes a tree.
See, now you should have recorded in front of your tree.
Yeah, see, we could have. Great scarf design, 10 out of 10, A+. I need to go back to doing the new ones that I got and grading those.
Yeah, continue the series.
But we can't do that until we start talking. And, well, really, we should take a moment of silence for the team that we're going to talk about first. It is a sad day in DP Podland when Minnesota United miss out on the playoffs. I guess you could call it karma. I guess you can call it comeuppance. I guess you can call it paybacks. We're family-friendly pod, so I can't say it. Minnesota United finish in 11th place this year. Oh, so sad. Enemies of the pod are on 41 points, one game out of the last play-in game spot. They were impacted by many factors, including needing to win out in their last two games and to get some help. And their only logical decision was to fire their manager in the middle of that playoff push. They would end up falling short on the last day of the season to Kansas City, who is fighting for that same spot on decision day on a win and get in moment. And we're going to talk about what went wrong. Connor, I'm going to ask you first. What do you think went wrong?
Wow, I get to start this time?
Yeah.
So I was telling you about my new setup ahead of the episode. And I jokingly talked about crunching numbers. But here's the thing. That's not a joke. I did crunch some numbers. And you can call me a nerd all you want. I don't really care.
You are a nerd.
You know, I come prepared with the facts. And one of the facts is that Minnesota was very inconsistent in their attack and defense. So,
wow.
I wanted to check the team's performance in the attack and the defense. And I used Teemu Pukki's first game against Austin to be that divider in the season. So I took a look at, I'll call it the BP before Pukki era. And then we take a look at the AP, the after Pukki era. And in the before Pukki era, what the numbers showed is that this team was allergic to goals. And that's for many reasons. No Teemu Pukki, no Reynoso for a lot of it, but the team could not score, and they had a 1.11 goals per game rate. On the flip side, they were actually a pretty strong defensive team. They had 1.32 goals conceded per game. And this strong defensive effort is really what kept them in the playoff push. Without this strong defensive play, this team probably wouldn't have been in the hunt on the final day. But then we flip it and we look at the after Pukki era. And both metrics changed. So they went from 1.11 goals per game to 1.67 goals per game. A big jump up there, nearly half a goal per game. A lot of that will have to do with them bringing in Pukki, having Reynoso finally fully back. That's definitely going to be a big factor. The issue is that all of a sudden this team just forgot how to play defense. And they went from 1.32 goals conceded per game to 1.73, almost conceding 2 goals a game, which is not good enough to help you make that playoff push. So while the attack drastically improved, the defense kept not they were unimproving. That's probably not even a word, but it kept it so that the fact that they were still conceding more goals per game despite this giant bump up in goals scored. And no better competition showed this than the Leagues Cup. The Leagues Cup, they were scoring a whopping 2.2 goals per game. They were banging in goals for fun. And I think we will all remember Leagues Cup Hlongwane because he was unreal in that tournament. The issue is that they conceded 2.6 goals per game in that tournament. They were shipping goals for fun. They are like the Amazon of shipping goals. So I checked Transfer Market because I wanted to see maybe this was a change in system that caused them to start conceding more goals. You know, maybe bringing in Pukki, having Reynoso finally kind of back involved in the team. Maybe they had to change things up in the way that they play. But what I saw was that in the AP era, the after Pukki era, they were mainly playing a 4-2-3-1. And this is not a foreign tactic to them because they played this 7 times during the BP era. So not necessarily a change in their tactic that may have necessarily caused them to start conceding more goals. I mean, I didn't watch Minnesota week in, week out, so maybe there was a just different style in the way that they played in the 4-2-3-1, but just looking at a straight up formation, it didn't really look like much had changed. So from a solution standpoint, we'll talk a little. I'm going to talk a little bit about the defense later. Spoiler alert. But maybe it comes from a lack of depth in the defense. Tapias and Boxall played nearly 3,000 minutes each just in the MLS regular season. So it really wouldn't surprise me too much if they were starting to lose a bit of steam towards the end of the season, especially when one of the two of them is 35 years old. So I'm not going to go too much into the solution more because I do want to talk about this more as another point later on, but I'll leave it at that.
I'll build off of it then. First of all, it's been a while since you've hit the world with your key phrase, man. You had it right there on a silver platter.
The kid, wrong side of 30.
Yeah,
It has been a while
he's on the
since I brought
wrong
that
side
out.
of 30. I haven't heard that in years.
It's true. It's true.
I thought it was coming. I was so excited, but it wasn't.
I'm
Um,
sorry. I will have to reiterate. I'll have to add it into my stuff going forward.
yeah, you're gonna have to. It's a staple, man. It's a staple of
It
what
is
we
a
do.
staple.
I'll build off of that and talk about over reliance on one player or underperformance of multiple players, I guess is a better way to put it. And very much like you, I went and dived into individuals, right? So um you just talked about Bongi Hlongwane stepping up into a role not many expected him to step up into. 8 league goals in just under 2,500 minutes or so. And he had 7 League Cup goals to boot.
Oh my God, he had 7.
It's 7 of them.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I think he won Golden Boot, and they didn't make it out of. I don't think they made it out of the first round.
No, they made it.
Did they
pretty
go
far.
deep?
They won a couple knockout games.
Okay, I couldn't remember. I thought it was the reason I thought that because it was really funny. Like if he just blows up, but you mentioned how bad they were defensively, and it didn't work for him. The issue is the rest of this team was just abysmal in front of goal until Timo Pukki joined the party, right? So Um, Mender Garcia, designated player, 3 goals, 1 assist. Luis Amaria, 2 goals. Ishmael Tajuri Shroudy, 1 goal, 2 assists. Franco Fragapane, who we thought was a baller when he first joined here, and he was, 1 goal, 2 assists. Sanbin Jeong, a U22 signing, 1 goal, 1 assist. Robin Ludd, who was injured for most of the season, but 0 goals, right? Players that you expect to step up into roles of assistance for these big key players, ghosting. And you cannot ask for a team of 3 people, and I include Pookie when he joined the team, to carry your entire team forward. You just can't do it. So definitely disappointing in the attack for them, for sure.
Yeah, it's a great catch. I think that explains their metric a lot. The change in the goal scoring once they brought in Pookie. Finally, someone who could finish off these chances. It really started to spike in their goals per game. But I already kind of led into what my next point was, but bad defensive depth. That's what I'm going to make my point to here. So, I want to continue on to what I was talking about there in a little bit more depth and explore the solution a little bit more here. So, as I said before, they went from a team that was conceding 1.32 goals per game at the start of the season, and then finished the season with conceding 1.73 goals per game. So, really, in this new era of MLS and MLS related competitions, I think you can just not get away with not utilizing depth anymore. So, on top of 34 regular season games, Minnesota also added 5 games to the Leagues Cup and another 3 games for the US Open Cup, meaning that they finished with 42 games played on the season. And that's with them not even being involved in CCL nor the playoffs. Tapias, Boxall, and DJ Taylor all played over 3,000 minutes this season across all competitions. So, in my opinion, it's really no wonder that if they were to lose steam at the end of the season, it just would not be surprising. I mean, that's a lot of minutes to put on legs, especially a 35-year-old wrong side of 30, Michael Boxall. Quite frankly, when I look at the team's defense, I kind of understand why they had to play them so often because there's just not a lot of depth there. So center back depth really consisted of aging players past their prime, like Coleman and Debasi. And then there's one other center back, which is a very young and unproven Mikael Marquez. And then when it comes to the outside back depth, it might be even worse than the center back depth. If you consider Valentin as the team's starting left back, I know that position kind of rotated a decent amount, but if you consider Valentin to be the starting left back, that leaves Bristow, who came over from Tranmere Rovers in League Two, and 2 academy players. So really not a lot of depth on fullbacks. The solution, in my opinion, and I understand that the league's financial rules make it a huge detriment to try to properly build depth in this league. But I think with the ever growing, no end in sight level of competitions that MLS teams are getting involved in, I think they need to invest in better depth in the defense. Other teams are able to figure it out, whether it's a combination of being able to properly integrate youngsters or finding those good TAM GAM level deals. But I think they really have to improve in building the depth of the defense. So, I think each year, I know you know the financials better than I do, but I think the TAM GAM budgets get a little bit better each year.
They do.
So I think they need to use that to make the most out of bringing in signings from within the league, guys who have experience and can be that guy to step up and soak up some minutes. I think definitely utilize the academy guys when you can. I think that's definitely important as well. But having some proven players on some TAM GAM deals would be super helpful so that they can jump into more of the important games or competitions.
Yeah. A lot of words there to say MLS roster rules hold people back because it's MLS 4.0 and you're going to invest in 7-8 games, not 1-0 games, right? But I don't disagree with you, right? If you want to be, and I think we're talking a lot about the future of MLS and where they're talking about a fourth DP and changing to the salary cap and blah 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 blah. All great, right? All awesome. But it's all about where you utilize that space, because as long as you have restrictions, you're going to have people who are prioritizing one area over the other, and it usually will end up being attacking level players, because one DP level center back doesn't make you a top level team. One DP level number 10 can take you from bottom to top in a year. So be interesting to see how that works. Speaking of game-changing number 10s, the fact that theirs didn't show up for 2 months, probably a big reason of why they weren't successful, right? As we saw in one of our recently posted TikTok MLS trivias, Reynoso led the entire league in shot creating action per 90 with a value of at least 8, if not a little bit more, per 90 minutes that he played. This would have been amazing if he didn't wait until a month and a half before the League Cup to get here. Those 8 chances per 90 might have actually led to some more points in the first half of the season. When he joined Minnesota, they were bang average. They were 5, 5, and 6. Every loss except one game was by 1 goal. You're telling me that if he's not involved in all the games that he missed, that they're not picking up at least some points from it, right? They're not picking up a draw to a win, or a win to or a loss to a draw, right? It would change the whole thought process by the end of the year too, right? If you're within 1 point instead of 3 points in that last game, maybe Adrian Heath sticks around, right? If you're in that spot and you have a 4-point lead going into the last 2 games of the season, maybe they stick around and they make a run or something. That month and a half, I know it doesn't feel like it because they did start off kind of hot. That month and a half hurt. How do you fix it? Make him show up. I don't know. I don't know how you fix. I don't know how you fix something like
Hold
that.
him against his will.
Yeah, don't let him go home. I don't know how you fix something like that. That's just kind of that's the crazy stuff about, again, if you're going to have a league where your big 3 players, you have to hit on them, and we're going to talk about this later, and one of them just doesn't show back up, well, that kind of sucks, because now you're trying to figure out how to put pieces together without being able to bring in replacements, right? So
yeah, that's a tough one, but I mean, I think maybe a solution is to try and set yourselves up that if your key guy is not here, you can still manage to get results. I know it's tough, because I know there's a number of teams where if you took their key guy out, the teams would just fall apart. But maybe they're relying too much on one guy for their team.
that's what Grace is telling me right now. She goes, Tom Barlow should have had 4,000 minutes this year. The fact that he didn't is the reason Red Bull didn't make it past the second round or the first round of the playoffs.
Tom Barlow to Minnesota. Who says no?
I think Minnesota. if I had to guess.
That's fair. That's probably a fair guess.
What's your third point?
All right. So my third point, I'm going to go with stale tactics. So I don't mean this to be a dig at Adrian Heath, because I think overall, I think he did a good job across his time with Minnesota, but it felt like the team wasn't making progress forward anymore, and I think they needed to change. So while he was at Minnesota, which began in their expansion year in 2017, he had gotten the team to a top 10 finish in the Supporters Shield only twice, and only got past the first round of the playoffs once, which was during the COVID year. I personally think there's enough talent in this team that they should be capable of doing more in the playoffs, and certainly should have been making the playoffs in a year where 64% of the conference made it. And I know you kind of talked about it already, but this season had a few bumps, namely the Reynoso saga at the start of the season, which, had those things not happened, surely this team would be in the playoffs. But there was still, I feel like, more than enough time from when Reynoso came back that they still could have made it into the expanded playoffs. So the solution, I mean, it's already in progress. The team split with Adrian Heath towards the end of the season, as you mentioned. I think it was like 2 games left in the season, and they were still in the playoff hunt. That's certainly an interesting choice, but so that's already the right start, I would say. The next step I would say is a tough one because this isn't exactly the same situation as a Toronto where you can just bring in a coach, blow up the team, and let him bring in whoever he wants. I think there's already a really good core here. So it'd be, in my opinion, it'd be dumb to blow it up for a new coach. I think you got to try to find someone um, who can work with the guys that are already on the roster and just kind of fill in the rest of the holes. And in my opinion, unless something gets released about what has happened, I think any team without a head coach should be foaming at the mouth for a chance to sign Bruce Arena right now.
Charlotte want him so bad.
And I don't blame him. In my opinion, I think he would genuinely take this team to the next level. So my solution, I mean, maybe it's an obvious one, but throw your hat in the Bruce Arena ring.
I mean, yeah, who wouldn't want to see Omar Gonzalez and Josie Altidore run it back in Minnesota when it's minus 12 degrees in February?
Hook it
I
to
don't know
my
about
veins.
you, but hook that to my veins, right? Emma Boateng
We
too.
we
Hell
need
yeah.
new ones. He can't repeat players that he already brought from New England. He needs new aging US players. Bill Hamid makes a comeback, I think.
Oh my god.
Who else? I don't know. We could probably have a whole episode on that.
Oh, that'd be
Ali
hilarious.
Bedoya, he's available.
Ideal Bruce Arena team. That is hilarious. My third point was also Adrian Heath themed, right? And I think they just had a lack of faith in him. They were in within touching distance of the playoffs and then firing your coach. It points directly to not trusting him in the big moments. And that's not a one season thing. Over the last few years, he's slowly been losing the faith of the front office and the fans and maybe even the locker room at this point. His team has not scored over 50 goals since 2019, which is also the last time he had a positive goal differential in a season. They always found themselves just sneaking into the playoffs since then. And Minnesota knows that they want more out of this group. And seeing it happen again on the outside looking in, they were not satisfied with just making the playoffs and going. They wanted to be in the top four. They want to be competing for titles. And Adrian Heath has run his course. I think you mentioned something along those lines where he's kind of stagnated. He's staled. His tactics have stalled, and they had enough. Now, again, we'll talk all the time. When they let him go, they were in the playoffs. They were still fighting for it, but when, at least according to Transfer Market, I could, they might have their dates off by a day because it's a German company, so they're off by like 8 hours or something. So sometimes late day. It's very weird. But to my research, they were in the playoffs with 2 games to go, and they fired. Then they missed out. That will always come up as is this the right decision? Because here's the thing: you get in the playoffs, anything can happen. Look at Sporting Kansas City. I'm trying to think of some other teams that have made Seattle back in 2016 when they started their big run with Nico. If you get in, things can happen. So to make that drastic of a change is always going to be questioned. But as you mentioned, I think Adrian Heath has been fine. I don't think he's been like naturally crazy. I just think his play style has been kind of meh. And because of that, I think that he still will find himself in a coaching role somewhere, right? I think Montreal, DC, Charlotte, all still looking. Charlotte seems like they might be in the Bruce Arena ring, but Adrian Heath at Montreal might be the right answer. DC, maybe, right? Like a guy who's just going to come in and say, this is the style of play we're going to do. We're going to be defensively sound. We're going to sneak goals out. We're going to be, disciplined in each phase of the game. And it may not work in year one, but by year two, we're going to, with the right signings and the right people to do the job, we're going to be in the conversation again. Kind of like he did in Minnesota, right? Minnesota comes in, first year they get blown out of the water. He goes, okay, here's this place I'm going to need. I need X, Y, and Z. Give me Ike Opara. Give me Ozzy Alonso. Give me Darwin Quintero. And he takes that team within a game of the U.S. Open Cup. He takes that team within a few games of top of the West. And then, like you mentioned, he kind of stagnates out and he falls out. But I think if you put him somewhere else, you will see the same sort of turnaround. So I think DC should be in that mix for him personally. But that's just me.
I mean, in an era where teams are signing Gary Neville and Chris Armas, to say that Adrian Heath doesn't deserve another job in MLS would be pretty crazy.
I agree. 100%. Let's just move on then, because I'm sure our friends in Minnesota will tell us how correct we are and how we didn't get anything wrong or miss anything. And did,
As they always do.
as they always do. But our friends at Portland might have different feelings. So for the second year in a row after making MLS Cup final in 21, Portland Timbers missed the playoffs again. 43 points found them in 10th in the West, a single point outside of the playoffs, which was enough to send Gio Savarese packing. While Phil Neville and his group look to rebuild a team back to the greatness of what it once was, we are going to look back at 2023 to figure out what went wrong. And I'll send it to you first, because I've been talking.
All right. Well, I'm gonna hit the obvious one here. What is that defense? And this is me just trying to change up the name for each of my segments so that it doesn't sound like I'm talking about the same thing over and over again. But yeah, I want to talk about the Portland defense. For the most part, the team was lining up in what looked to be a 4-3-3 this season, with Paredes or Diego Chara being the deeper midfielders. And then the back line, for the most part, consisted of, from left to right, Bravo, McGraw, Zuparic, and Mosquera. If you look at the defensive statistics at each player at their positions, and I went based off of the great tool on FBref that does the comparison to other players in the same position. Claudio Bravo was solid. Zach McGraw was phenomenal. Zuparic was bad. Mosquera basically played no defense. Diego Chara was okay. And Paredes was pretty good. The problem was that Paredes, a number of times, would be playing a bit more forward. So sometimes they'd be playing a 4-3-3 that's a bit more attacking. And in that case, Paredes would be a bit further up the field as opposed to deeper to where Diego Chara usually plays. And that meant that if teams could beat a 37-year-old Diego Chara, they basically only had two defenders to beat, that being Bravo and Zach McGraw. And all of this really resulted in them conceding 58 goals this season and having one of the worst defensive records in the league. And the solution's a little tough because I know there's a lot of factors at play here. I know one of them is that they had two important midfielders out with injuries, that being Eric Williamson and David Ayala. Getting those guys back will be an automatic boost to the midfield defense. There's also a factor of, playing a tactic that helps areas with defensive holes, such as that right side of the defense. That will now be the job of Gary Neville next season. So it doesn't exactly fill me with super amounts of confidence, but I will reserve judgment. Finally, there's just getting better defensive players. A stronger center back pairing for Zach McGraw, I think, would help a ton. Or even adding a couple more center backs can help if they play with a three at the back. Can help to cover the defensive hole that is Mosquera, who likes to bomb forward and not play much defense. So there's a few factors here. Some of it's just a patience game, but I think some of it is, the obvious and just trying to find better players for the defense.
I don't know where I'm going to pick up there because I've got points kind of scattered throughout there. I'll just go in order. Screw it. We vibe over here.
Go for it.
I'm going to talk about the underperformance of designated players. We talked about it a little bit before. We've talked about it in past iterations of this miniseries. In a system where your roster rules only allow you to get three big name players who are supposed to carry the load, you cannot swing and miss. You can kind of get away with having one, but you can't swing and miss on two of them. And that's what happened here. Whether it be injuries or lack of ability or whatever it may be, the Timbers swung and missed on two of their three. Blanco was one of the injured ones. He got hurt early on. He didn't get over 500 minutes this year, only started twice, really didn't contribute much at all. And that now handicaps you from having, even at 35 years old, being an impact off the bench. Now, there were a lot of things up in the air about whether he was or was not a designated player. This is being listed from Wikipedia, right? Because it was, at at one point it was Niezgoda, it was Blanco, it was Yimi Chara, and it was, check really quick here. The fourth one was Evander, right? Of course, because he's still here. And it was told that Chara and Blanco, or Blanco and Niezgoda, or Chara, and there was a lot of lists. So I'm just going off of what Wikipedia said because I'm still not quite sure who is who. Blanco, Niezgoda, Evander were listed as the three designated players. Blanco didn't get over 500 minutes. Niezgoda didn't get over 700 minutes, and he also got hurt towards the end of the year. However, it really didn't matter because he only broke 45 minutes in a game 3 times in the first 20 appearances he made. He couldn't break into the starting 11. He couldn't make an impact when he was on the field. He lost the faith of the coach. And when you're getting paid over $1 million to do that and not allow that to be tied up in other, resources, not a great. So having him gone and likely Blanco either gone or down on a DP, off a DP deal next year if he does come back, really opens up a lot of options for them, and hopefully they don't swing and miss. But you can't miss on 2 of your 3 in this setup right now, or 2 of your 4 maybe next year. Who knows? Ooh,
You took the words right out of my mouth. My
aw,
next point was getting more out of your designated players.
nice.
I'll just kind of go through my notes. I'm sure a lot of it steps right on what you were just talking about. But I think this is probably an obvious one for a lot of people's focus on what went wrong for Portland this season. And I think a lot of people's focus honestly was on Evander because he had a really slow start. He had a really big price tag. The expectations were super high. But to your point, I don't think he was really the problem for the designated player spot. I went off the same thing. I checked Wikipedia. It had Evander, Niezgoda, and Blanco as the DPs. So that's what I went along with as well. And starting with Evander, the question is, was his season below expectations? In my opinion, I would say yes. Was this a bad season? Not at all. He finished as the team's leading scorer with 9 goals and chipped in another 5 assists. That is solid. That is very solid. Honestly, I'll take any chance to bring him up, but it reminds me of South American Player of the Year, Pity Martinez. Huge price tag that came in, high expectations, still put in like good numbers and still was a good player in the league, just never really hit the superstar MVP level that people were expecting of them. And Evander's got more time. He's, I'm not trying to label him as the next Pity Martinez already, but definitely don't think he had a bad season at all. The other 2 DPs, as you were talking about before, that's a whole nother story. And I know that they were battling injuries like you were talking about, but the biggest thing for me was that they still combined between the 2 of them made 37 appearances this season, but only 7 of those were starts. They just couldn't either consistently stay healthy to be on the field, or they just couldn't get the trust of the coach to be a starter in this team. And I mean, that's 2 designated player spots. That's just, you can't do that in this era of MLS.
Correct.
They combined for 2 goals and 1 assist in the season from 2 designated players. That's not good enough.
Sorry, I did want to go ahead. Yeah, keep going.
No, it's okay. You can jump in.
The Portland Timbers official roster on Timbers.com lists Yimi Chara as the 3rd one, not Blanco. But even then, Yimi Chara didn't break 750 minutes. He only had a goal and 3 assists. So it's the same deal. That he also had injuries with muscles and hamstrings and stuff, and which sucks. But yeah, you still can't get away with stuff like that.
Yeah.
Not here.
Yeah.
It's probably a nod to saying maybe don't sign 3 designated players or close designated players, all of which are 29, 34, and 32.
Yeah.
And then you had Evander, who's the young guy, but still.
It's probably a good idea. Solution, with a rumored potential 4th designated player spot coming next year, if we can get the Colorado owner types to buckle, it's going to be more important than ever to get your DPs right, because teams who can get it right with 4 designated player spots are going to be at a different level. And teams that swing and miss or don't try at all are going to be left in the dust. It's not going to be MLS 2.0 anymore, where you can sign a couple of aging designated players, and because there's only a couple of them, like, you can get away with them not being good or not playing. It's just not going to work anymore. So they need to get whatever combination of Blanco, Niezgoda, and or Chara off designated player contracts like yesterday. Let Gary Neville bring in the designated players that he wants for his system to pair with Evander, and then give them the game time next season. I know some of it is out of their control with injuries and stuff, but get them to play consistently and get some decent minutes this year. They got to at least be above 1,000 minutes.
Yeah,
It's a low bar, but
right now they haven't hit it. So yeah, it's a good point. I still can't believe we're begging owners to add one more DP slot. Like, we're not even saying you have to use it, but just add it.
I can't believe there's I mean, I can believe that there's owners fighting against it, but it's just so awful that they're fighting against that. I wish nothing more than those owners to sell their teams and get out of the league.
Bro, I'm telling you, like, anti-MLS Twitter and like anti-MLS crew, they don't always have legs to stand on. Most of the time they don't. But when they talk about stuff like that, it's like, okay, now you're giving them the fuel to just spew more stupid, right?
We should just all team up and we can maybe get them out of the league. That would
I,
be
I'd
the goal.
I'd really be interested to see what it would look like to have like a fan-owned MLS side. I doubt it would happen, but I think it'd be pretty cool. Like, I see like Orange County and USL is doing like a fan-owned type of thing, or like at least a fan-owned portion. I think that's pretty cool, but I can't imagine
Nah, there's
it
too much
happening
money
here.
being thrown around in the US. It would get bought up really quick.
Yeah. Um, my second point, I love me some off-field drama. So I'm going to our friend Aljaz Ivacic and talking a little bit about his antics. We mentioned it with DC, we mentioned it with TFC. Off the field issues distract you from the game in front of you. Portland were affected by this as well when Aljaz Ivacic brought his grievances to the media about Timbers coaching decisions. So on the third game of the season, he was benched 3 times in a row, and people thought that he was just injured, right? Oh, he's not playing because he played a whole bunch last year. You picked him in your top 5 goalkeeper draft, I'm pretty sure. We all thought he was going to be the guy, and he was bench. And we all thought he was injured, and he comes to a reporter and says that he was fit to play and everything else was a lie, end quote. Gio Savarese then had to face the media, explain why he lost the starting spot to David Bingham. He didn't do enough stuff in training. He wasn't working hard enough, blah, 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 blah. Fast forward 6 months to September, where he files a complaint against with the MLSPA for, quote, abusive conduct and tampering, claiming that he wanted to leave Portland Timbers and was denied multiple times. 2 weeks later, this ends with MLS suspending Ivacic for 3 games and fining him an undisclosed amount for using threatening language towards officials of the Portland Timbers. He ended up playing like 15 or 17 games, or 15 or 17 games, and Portland obviously didn't finish. But when all that stuff is going on in the locker room, and a guy who's going out saying that the coach doesn't know anything and that people aren't as good as you and blah 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 blah, that dude walked to the locker room on the morning of a training session. The energy in the room goes, right? Everybody's having a good time, laughing. That dude walks in, it's like, oh, here's Mr. All About Me, who doesn't want to be here and we can't talk about anything anymore. He's going to, spew it out to the media. It kills anything you're doing. And then you try and take that out to the field. That's a night. So all of that had to have taken a toll on the locker room. And then inevitably it would lead to some on the pitch issues as well. I'm a big fan of winning in the locker room first. And obviously Portland was not successful in that endeavor.
Yeah, not to mention that he plays in a very vocal leadership-esque position and goalkeeper.
Oh yeah.
It's a great point. Mine is unrelated, but my last point here for them is a lack of consistency. This team was massively inconsistent all year, and I'm sure there were many factors that play in that. some of which I'm sure we already talked about. But to begin the season, the team only won one of their first 7 games. On the flip side, towards the end of the season, right when we were doing our predictions, of course, this team put themselves in a prime position to make the playoffs, uh, going on a 7-game unbeaten streak where they won 5 of those 7 games. And it put them in prime position to make the playoffs, but again, the inconsistency hit. And in the last 3 games of the season, where they were in a really good spot to make it, they got 1 point and managed to miss the playoffs. So, really, honestly, this last part was the biggest thing for me. But outside of that late win streak that they had in the season, this team did not win back-to-back games the entire year.
Wow.
They were just incapable of getting any sort of consistency going. And I'm sure a huge part of that is the injuries. I feel like every guy we've talked about so far had some kind of injury for them this season. That's definitely not going to help. But solution wise, I mean, inevitably it will get better as these guys get healthier again. But I think it's kind of obvious, but having consistent lineups and tactics will, I think, help the team play more consistently. It'll help them build chemistry together. It'll help them play more consistently. And whether the results and the healthiness of the squad allow for this next season, that's another story. But I think getting healthy, maybe it is to your point before. Maybe you gotta choose your designated players more carefully. Pick guys with less of an injury history. Pick guys that are a bit younger. Maybe that helps to keep them more consistent and on the field.
Yeah, and that actually rolls right into my third point pretty well. It is the injury train. Um, David Ayala, Eric Williamson, both of them going down with knee injuries early on. You are likely seeing them as 2 of your guys that you're going to rotate your midfield around. And that's a lot of your game plan gone when both of them are done. You add in Blanco, Niazgoda, Yimi Chara, a bunch of players in that kind of category that we were just talking about. You're missing, like you come into a season with a game plan, right? This is how I expect my players to play. And you have your I'll use the term surprises. The guys who you come in, you're like, oh, he's probably not going to do too much. Oh, wow, he's done well in training. Let's try him out. Let's try him out. He does well in a game or two. It gives you some difficult things to deal with. But what you're not ready for is losing 2 or 3 of your big players so early on in the season and then having to try and work around that when you can't bring in replacements. So stuff like that is difficult. And then that's where you're like, okay, well, I hope my academy's up to snuff because they're the next guys up. And when they're not, and they're not ready, well, that's where things start to go bad. So Portland couldn't play through their injuries this year, which again is tough in a league like MLS, but that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. But that's also the reason why we can't do too many big punishments for the league the way it's set up, right? How are you going to tell somebody, oh yeah, 2 of your 3 designated players are out for the year? You have to play academy kids, and if you don't, we're cutting your franchise value by 90%. Good luck. Just can't, right? So yeah, hopefully they're all healthy. They come back next year a bit stronger and are ready to go again. All right. Do you have anything else you want to add?
I do not.
Right. Well, thanks everybody for listening to this episode of Designated Players Podcast. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcast because we've got a big guest coming up for episode 200. We're not going to spoil it yet, but know that it is going to be a fantastic episode with lots of insights for the 2024 season. Make sure you're following us wherever you get your social media so you can interact with us and hang out with us on the socials. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, we're all over the place. Make sure you go hang out with us, comment and interact with us because I'm not trying to brag, but I did tweet something yesterday that got 40 likes. So kind of a big deal. Yeah, thanks so much for listening, everybody. We hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players Podcast. See ya.